Hi, my name is Jordan Pierce. 6 months ago, my wife walked out on me in front of her entire family because I couldn't afford the life she wanted. She threw her wedding ring at my chest and told me I'd always be a failure. I lost everything that night: my marriage, my home, my self-respect. Desperate and broken, I took a job cleaning servers in a basement data center for a reclusive tech billionaire most people thought was a myth. But that job led me to a discovery. One that exposed not just cutting-edge technology, but the people who orchestrated my downfall in the first place. And when I stood on that stage 3 months later, shaking hands with the CEO as cameras flashed, and the press called it the largest tech acquisition in history, she was there. Front row, pale, frozen, holding the same designer purse she carried the night she left. And this time, I was the one who walked away. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They told me to wait in the hallway while they finished setting up for the toast. I stood there in a suit I'd bought on clearance 3 years ago, the collar slightly frayed, listening to the sound of champagne glasses clinking and polished laughter echoing through the banquet hall. This was supposed to be our anniversary dinner. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of promises that tomorrow would be better, that the next opportunity would be the one, that love was supposed to be enough. Luna Martinez moved through rooms like she owned the oxygen in them. That night she glided into the private dining area of Bellwood Manor, wearing a dress I knew cost more than my monthly rent. Her heels were sharp, deliberate, each step a small declaration of distance. She didn't look at me when she entered. Her eyes scanned the room first, landing on her parents, her brother, her college friends who'd flown in for the occasion. Then, finally, she looked at me. And I knew. I'd seen that look before, the one that said she'd already made a decision and was just waiting for the right audience to announce it. She walked over slowly, her jaw tight, her fingers wrapped around a slim black clutch I'd never seen before. Probably new. Probably expensive. Probably bought with someone else's money. "Jordan," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremble underneath it, not from sadness, from something colder. Something rehearsed. I can't do this anymore. The room didn't go silent. People kept talking, kept laughing, but I could feel the shift. The way conversations slowed just enough for ears to tune in, the way heads turned slightly, pretending not to notice. "What are you talking about?" I asked quietly, trying to keep my voice calm. She opened the clutch and pulled out her wedding ring. The same ring we'd picked out together at a small jeweler in the Arts District, because it was all I could afford at the time. She'd said it was perfect. She'd said she didn't care about the size or the brand. She'd said it was us that mattered. She held it between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. "You're stuck, Jordan. You've been stuck for years, and I'm done pretending that's going to change." She dropped the ring into my open palm. It was warm from her hand. "I need someone who can actually build a life, not someone who talks about it over cheap takeout every night." I stood there, frozen, staring at the gold band in my hand. Around us the whispers started. Quiet at first, then louder. Her mother, Vivian, swept in from the side, all pearls and pity, her smile too wide, her tone too sweet. "Jordan, dear," she said, touching my arm like I was a wounded animal, "you're a kind man, but kindness doesn't pay mortgages. Luna deserves stability. Surely you can understand that." Her father didn't even look at me. He just raised his glass and said something about how some people were meant to dream and others were meant to execute. Someone laughed. Someone else took a photo. I saw the flash out of the corner of my eye. Luna turned and walked toward the exit without looking back. Her brother held the door open for her. Her friends followed. One of them glanced at me with something close to pity. But it didn't matter. Pity doesn't change anything. I was left standing there, alone, in a room full of people who suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. The ring sat heavy in my hand, a small circle of gold that used to mean forever. Now it just felt like evidence. I didn't say a word. There was nothing to defend. You can't argue your worth to people who've already decided you don't have any. That night, I packed my things into 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. The apartment we'd shared for 3 years wasn't mine anymore. Her name was on the lease. Her furniture filled the rooms. I'd contributed what I could, but it was never enough. It was never mine. I slept in my car that first night, parked in a grocery store lot on the east side of town where the lights stayed on all night. I kept the heater running until the gas needle dipped too low, then I wrapped myself in a jacket and tried to sleep sitting up. My phone buzzed twice. Both times I hoped it was her. Both times it wasn't. By morning I'd called my older brother, Damien. He didn't pick up. I texted him. No response. Damien had always been the successful one. Graduate degree, corner office, wine collection. Our last real conversation ended with him saying, "Jordan, you're 32. At some point you have to stop waiting for life to happen and make it happen." He probably thought he was helping. The bills started coming fast. Car insurance, phone bill, the credit card I'd maxed out trying to keep up with Luna's lifestyle. I checked my bank account and saw triple digits. Barely. I opened my email out of reflex, scrolling past job rejection after job rejection. Then I saw it. One new message. Subject line: immediate hire, data center technician, discretion required. I clicked it without thinking. The job description was vague: overnight shifts, server maintenance, physical labor, high security clearance required. Pay was decent, not great, but enough to survive. The location was listed as an industrial zone in North Ashford, a part of the city I'd only driven through once. The email ended with a single line: serious inquiries only. Interview tonight if available. I responded within 5 minutes. By 9 p.m., I was on a bus heading north through streets I didn't recognize. The air outside was damp, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones and doesn't leave. The buildings grew sparser the farther we went, warehouses and distribution centers replacing storefronts and apartment complexes. The address led me to a gated facility surrounded by 12-foot fences and security cameras every 20 feet. The sign at the entrance read, "Arclane Systems Authorized Personnel Only." I'd never heard of it. A guard at the gate checked my ID, made a call, then waved me through without a word. Inside, the main building was massive. Concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, and the low hum of machines running somewhere deep below. A woman in a gray uniform met me at the entrance. She didn't smile. She didn't introduce herself. She just said, "Follow me." We walked through a maze of hallways, no windows, no decorations. Just sterile white walls, and the occasional door marked with numbers I didn't understand. Other workers passed us. Most didn't make eye contact. One guy in a blue jumpsuit looked up, muttered, "New guy," and kept walking. We stopped at a reinforced metal door. She scanned a key card, and it opened with a hydraulic hiss. Inside was a staircase leading down. The air grew cooler with each step. At the bottom, another door. Another scan. Then, finally, we entered. The data center stretched out like a cathedral of steel and light, rows upon rows of black server racks, each one humming with quiet power. Blue and green indicator lights blinked in rhythmic patterns. The floor was spotless. The air was cold enough to see your breath. "You'll be working third shift," the woman said, "midnight to 8. Your job is to maintain the hardware, clean the units, monitor temperature. Replace anything that fails. You don't touch the software. You don't ask questions. You show up, you do the work, you leave. Understood?" I nodded. She handed me a badge, a locker key, and a thin tablet with a checklist already loaded. "Locker rooms upstairs, uniforms inside, shift starts in an hour." Then she left. I stood there alone, surrounded by machines I didn't fully understand, in a building I'd never heard of, working for people I hadn't even met. But it was a paycheck, and right now that was all I had. The first week at Arclane Systems passed in a blur of exhaustion and silence. I moved through the data center like a ghost, checking temperatures, replacing failed drives, wiping down server racks with microfiber cloths that cost more than my daily meals. The work was monotonous, but it was stable. No one asked about my life. No one cared. I'd found a room to rent on the south side of town. It was small, barely large enough for a twin bed and a desk. But it had a door that locked, and a window that didn't face a wall. The landlord, an older man named Hector, didn't ask questions. He just took my first month's rent in cash and handed me a key. Every morning I came home as the sun was rising. I'd eat something quick, usually instant noodles or a protein bar, then collapse into bed and sleep until the afternoon. When I woke up, I'd stare at my phone, scrolling through social media I shouldn't have been looking at. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Luna had already changed her profile picture. She wasn't alone. In the new photo, she stood next to a man I didn't recognize. Tall, clean-cut, wearing a suit that actually fit. His arm was around her waist. Her smile was wide, confident. The caption read, "New Beginnings." It had been posted 4 days after she left me. I should have unfollowed her, blocked her, moved on. But I couldn't. Some part of me needed to see it, needed to feel the full weight of what I'd lost. Or maybe I just needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that she really had moved on that fast. The comments under the photo were worse than the picture itself. Friends congratulating her, family members saying things like, "You deserve this," and, "Finally." One comment from her mother read, "So proud of you for choosing happiness." Choosing happiness. As if I'd been the thing standing in the way of it. I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of traffic outside. I thought about calling Damien again. Maybe this time he'd pick up. Maybe this time he'd actually listen. But I didn't call. Because I already knew what he'd say. He'd tell me to move on, to focus on work, to stop feeling sorry for myself. And he wouldn't be wrong, but that didn't mean I was ready to hear it. By the second week, I'd settled into a rhythm. Wake up at 10 p.m., shower, eat something, catch the bus to North Ashford, scan in at midnight, work until dawn, come home, sleep, repeat. It wasn't a life, it was survival. But survival was all I had left. The other workers at Arkland kept to themselves. There were maybe a dozen of us on the night shift, spread across different sections of the facility. I rarely saw the same person twice. When I did, we'd exchange brief nods, nothing more. It was like we'd all signed an unspoken agreement to stay invisible. Except for one guy. His name was Eric. Mid-40s, gray streaks in his beard, always wearing the same faded Arkline jacket. He worked in the server monitoring station, a small glass-walled office overlooking the main floor. One night, as I was logging my checklist on one of the terminals, he walked over. "You settling in all right?" he asked. I looked up, surprised. "Yeah, it's fine." He nodded slowly, hands in his pockets. "This place can mess with your head if you let it. All the silence, the repetition. Just remember, it's just a job. Don't let it become who you are." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. He gave me a small smile, then walked back to his station. It was the most human interaction I'd had in 2 weeks. On the 15th day, I made a mistake. I was cleaning one of the older server racks in Section C, a part of the facility I didn't usually work in. The rack was labeled differently than the others. No number. Just a single word stamped into the metal. Helix. I didn't think much of it at first, but as I wiped down the exterior, I noticed something odd. The access panel on the side wasn't fully closed. There was a small gap, barely noticeable, but enough to see a faint glow coming from inside. I glanced around. No cameras in this section. No other workers nearby. I hesitated, then carefully pulled the panel open. Inside, instead of the usual tangle of cables and circuit boards, there was a sleek black module about the size of a shoebox. It had no labels, no markings, just a smooth matte surface with a single blinking green light. I'd never seen anything like it in any of the other racks. I reached out, not to touch it, just to get a closer look. But before my hand got within 6 inches, the light turned red. A low beep echoed from somewhere inside the rack, then the panel snapped shut on its own. I jerked back, heart pounding. I looked around again, expecting alarms, guards, something. But nothing happened. The facility stayed quiet. The machines kept humming. I closed the outer panel, logged the rack as cleaned, and moved on to the next one. But my hands were shaking. That night, as I was clocking out, the woman who'd hired me, the one in the gray uniform, was waiting near the exit. She didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me with the same blank expression she always wore. "Section C is off limits from now on," she said flatly. "You'll be reassigned to sections A and B only." I didn't. I know, she interrupted, but rules are rules. Stay in your assigned areas. She turned and walked away before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, staring at the reinforced doors leading back into the facility. Something was wrong, not just with that server rack, with all of this. The secrecy, the silence, the way everyone moved through this place like they were afraid to be noticed. I thought about quitting, walking out, and never coming back, but I couldn't. I had no savings, no backup plan, no one waiting for me on the other side. So I got on the bus and went home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The black module, the red light, the way that woman had been waiting for me, like she'd known. Around 4 a.m., I finally gave up and opened my laptop. I typed Arcline Systems into the search bar. Nothing came up. No company website. No news articles. No LinkedIn profiles. It was like the place didn't exist outside of that facility. I tried Helix server technology. A few vague results popped up. Most were academic papers about data encryption and quantum processing. Nothing concrete. Nothing that explained what I'd seen. I closed the laptop and rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just proprietary tech and I'd accidentally stumbled into a restricted area. Maybe that's all it was. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something about that rack, that module, that entire facility felt wrong. And the more I tried to ignore it, the louder that feeling became. I thought about Luna, about how she'd looked at me that night, like I was small, insignificant, a man who'd never amount to anything. And I realized something. She'd been right. Not because I wasn't capable, but because I'd spent so long letting other people define my worth that I'd forgotten how to define it myself. I didn't know what was happening at Arcline. I didn't know what that black module was, or why they didn't want me near it. But for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than numbness. I felt curious. And curiosity, I'd come to learn, was the first step towards something bigger. By the third week, I'd stopped trying to make sense of Arcline. I clocked in, did my work, clocked out. I kept my head down and my questions to myself. The reassignment to sections A and B meant I never went near that Helix rack again. But I thought about it. Every shift. Every time I passed the entrance to Section C, now marked with a red keycard scanner I didn't have access to. The facility had a rhythm, and once you learned it, the job became almost meditative. The hum of the servers, the blinking lights, the cold, recycled air. It was easy to lose yourself in it, easy to forget there was a world outside those concrete walls. But then, things started changing. It began with the visitors. I'd been told Arcline was a private data center, the kind that handled sensitive corporate information for clients who valued discretion. That made sense. What didn't make sense was the kind of people I started seeing during my shifts. One night, around 2 a.m., I was replacing a cooling fan in Section B when I heard voices. Not unusual, sometimes supervisors did walkthroughs. But these voices were different. Confident. Expensive. I glanced over and saw 3 people being escorted through the main corridor by 2 security guards in black tactical gear. 2 of the visitors were men in tailored suits. The third was a woman, younger, maybe early 30s, wearing a long coat and carrying a leather briefcase. They moved quickly, barely glancing at the servers, heading straight toward a reinforced elevator at the far end of the facility. An elevator I'd never been inside. An elevator I'd been told was for executive access only. I watched them disappear behind the steel doors, then turned back to my work. But my mind kept circling back to the same question. What kind of data center needed armed escorts at 2 a.m.? The next night, it happened again. Different people. Same destination. And the night after that. Always between midnight and 3. Always heading to that elevator. I started paying closer attention. I noticed that before each visit, the facility would go into what the other workers quietly called lockdown light. Certain sections would be closed off. Additional security would appear. We'd be instructed to stay in our assigned areas and avoid the main corridors during specific windows. No one explained why. No one asked. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. On the 23rd day, Eric found me during a break. I was sitting in the small break room on the second floor, eating a sandwich and scrolling through my phone. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me without asking. "You've been here almost a month," he said. I looked up. "Yeah." "Still think it's just a job?" I set my phone down. "What do you mean?" He leaned back, arms crossed. "You seem like a smart guy, Jordan. You notice things. So I'm guessing you've noticed this place isn't exactly what they told you it was." I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure if this was a test or if he was genuinely trying to help. "I notice people come and go," I said carefully. "I notice we're not supposed to ask about it." Eric nodded slowly. "That's smart. Keep noticing. Keep not asking." He stood up, grabbed his coffee, and headed toward the door. Then he paused and looked back. "But if you ever want to understand what you're really a part of here, start paying attention to who's funding this place, not what they say, who." Then he left. I sat there for a long time after that, staring at the empty chair across from me. That same night, I made a decision. If I was going to stay here, if I was going to keep working in a place that felt more like a black site than a data center, I needed to know what I was really involved in. So I started looking. It wasn't hard to find the employee records. They were kept in a shared digital directory accessible from any terminal in the building. Most of it was basic information: schedules, certifications, payroll. But buried in the directory was a folder labeled Contract Affiliations. I opened it. Inside were dozens of documents: NDAs, partnership agreements, funding authorizations. I skimmed through them quickly, looking for names I recognized. Most were corporate entities I'd never heard of. Shell companies, probably. But then I saw one that made me stop. Hartfield Capital Group. I knew that name. Everyone did. Hartfield was one of the largest private equity firms in the country. They funded everything from pharmaceutical startups to defense contractors. And according to the document in front of me, they were the primary investor in Arcline Systems. But it wasn't the company name that made my stomach drop. It was the signature at the bottom of the contract. Victor Hartfield, CEO, Luna's new boyfriend. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. It couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't be. I quickly opened another browser window and searched for Victor Hartfield. His profile came up immediately. Mid-30s. Harvard MBA, Forbes 30. Under 30. A photo of him at some charity gala, smiling next to Luna. The caption read, "Victor Hartfield and partner Luna Martinez at the annual Hartfield Foundation Gala. Partner." I closed the browser and sat back in my chair, trying to process what I'd just found. Luna hadn't just moved on. She'd moved up. And somehow, the company I was now working for was tied directly to the man she'd left me for. I didn't believe in coincidences. Not anymore. Over the next few days, I kept digging. I pulled up everything I could find on Hartfield Capital Group. Their investments, their portfolio companies, their board members. The more I learned, the more the pieces started falling into place. Hartfield didn't just fund tech companies. They specialized in acquisitions, hostile takeovers, buying struggling startups, gutting them, and selling off the valuable parts. And Arcline, according to a buried financial report I found, wasn't a data center at all. It was a testing ground. The servers I'd been maintaining weren't storing data for clients. They were running simulations, stress tests, prototypes for something called Project Silver Lake, a next-generation AI architecture designed to process and predict financial markets in real time. If it worked, it would be worth billions. And Hartfield Capital Group owned 60% of it. I sat in that break room, staring at my laptop screen, feeling the full weight of what I'd uncovered. I wasn't just a janitor cleaning servers. I was part of a machine designed to make people like Victor Hartfield even richer. And Luna had known. She had to have known. I thought back to the last few months of our marriage. The way she'd started asking questions about my work, where I was applying, what kind of companies I was interested in. I thought she was just being supportive. But now I wondered if she'd been gathering information. If she'd been reporting back. I closed the laptop and stood up, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to do with this information. I didn't know who to tell or if I even should. But one thing was clear. I hadn't ended up at Arcline by accident. I'd been placed here. And someone, somewhere, was watching to see what I'd do next. I stopped sleeping well after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that contract. That signature. Victor Hartfield. The name felt like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing on. I'd lie in bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, running through scenarios in my head. Had Luna known about Arcline before we split? Had she fed him information about me? Was I hired because I was qualified, or because I was convenient? The questions multiplied faster than I could answer them. But I couldn't quit. Not yet. If I walked away now, I'd never know the truth. So I kept showing up, kept scanning my badge, kept moving through those cold hallways like nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. I started watching people differently. The way the security guards positioned themselves during lockdown windows. The way certain sections of the facility would go dark without explanation. The way Eric would glance at me during shifts like he was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. On the 28th day, I was assigned to a new task. Instead of server maintenance, I was told to assist with hardware installation in the sublevels. I'd never been to the sublevels before. Didn't even know they existed until a supervisor handed me a yellow clearance badge and told me to report to Base 6 by 1 a.m. The sublevel entrance was hidden behind an unmarked door near the loading docks. I scanned my badge and the door hissed open, revealing a steep metal staircase descending into darkness. The air grew colder with each step. By the time I reached the bottom, I could see my breath. Base 6 was massive, easily 3 times the size of the main data center. But instead of server racks, the room was filled with modular units, each one about the size of a shipping container. They were arranged in a grid, connected by thick bundles of fiber optic cables that snaked across the floor like veins. A technician in a white clean room suit was waiting for me. He didn't introduce himself, just handed me a clipboard and pointed to a stack of components in the corner. Install these into units 12 through 18, he said. Follow the diagram, don't deviate. I looked at the components. They were small, metallic, shaped like hexagonal plates. Each one had a serial number etched into the surface. I glanced at the diagram. It showed where to mount them inside the units, but it didn't explain what they were. "What are these?" I asked. The technician didn't look at me. "Processing nodes. Just install them." I wanted to ask more, but the way he said it made it clear the conversation was over. I spent the next 4 hours installing those nodes. Each unit required precise placement, and the diagram left no room for error. The work was tedious, but it gave me time to observe. The modular units weren't like anything I'd seen before. They didn't have standard server hardware. Instead, they were filled with custom-built components, all black, all unmarked, and each one hummed with a low, almost subsonic frequency that I could feel in my chest. Halfway through the shift, another technician entered the bay. This one was older, maybe late 50s, with deep lines around his eyes. He walked past me without a word, stopped at one of the units, and opened a panel I hadn't noticed before. Inside was a screen, not a monitor. A screen embedded directly into the unit itself. He tapped it a few times, and lines of code began scrolling across the display. I couldn't read most of it, but I caught a few fragments. Market prediction algorithm. Real-time sentiment analysis. Execution probability, 94.7%. He closed the panel and walked out. I stood there, staring at the unit, my mind racing. This wasn't just data processing, this was something else. Something designed to predict, to analyze, to execute. And if Hartfield Capital Group owned 60% of it, that meant they had access to a machine that could manipulate markets before anyone else even knew what was happening. I finished the installation, logged my work, and took the stairs back up to the main level. My hands were shaking again, not from fear, from anger. Luna had left me because I couldn't provide the life she wanted. But the man she'd left me for was building an empire on technology that could destabilize entire economies. And I was helping him do it. That night, I didn't go home. I sat in the parking lot outside Arcline, engine running, heat on low, staring at the facility through the chain-link fence. The building looked ordinary from the outside. Just another industrial complex. But I knew what was inside now. I knew what it was capable of. And I knew I had to do something about it. But what? I wasn't a whistleblower. I wasn't a hacker. I was just a guy who'd lost everything and taken a job to survive. I had no proof, no allies, no plan. But I had something else. I had access. Over the next week, I started documenting everything, every task I was assigned, every piece of hardware I installed, every conversation I overheard. I used my phone to take photos of serial numbers, diagrams, anything that might be useful later. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I needed evidence. The facility started feeling different after that. The cameras that had always been there suddenly felt more invasive. The security guards, who used to ignore me now, seemed to watch a little too closely. I told myself I was being paranoid, but paranoia, I was learning, was just pattern recognition without enough data. On the 35th day, I saw her. Not Luna. Someone else. I was walking through the main corridor during a shift change when I noticed a woman standing near the executive elevator. She was tall, mid-40s, wearing a charcoal suit and carrying a tablet. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her expression was unreadable. But it was her eyes that caught me. Sharp, calculating, like she was measuring everyone who walked past her. I kept walking, trying not to stare, but as I passed, she turned her head slightly and looked directly at me. Not a glance, a look, the kind that lingers just long enough to make you uncomfortable. Then she stepped into the elevator and disappeared. I found Eric later that night in the monitoring station. "Who was that woman by the executive elevator?" I asked. He didn't look up from his screens. "You mean Dr. Cora Ashford?" "I don't know. Tall, dark suit, looked like she ran the place." Eric's fingers paused over the keyboard. "That's her. She's the director of operations. Reports directly to the investors." "She always here?" "Only when something important is happening." He finally looked at me. "Why?" I shrugged. "Just curious." Eric studied me for a moment, then turned back to his screens. "Be careful with your curiosity, Jordan. This place doesn't like questions." I nodded and left. But the warning came too late. Because I'd already decided. I wasn't just going to watch anymore. I was going to find out exactly what Arcline Systems was building. And I was going to find out who put me here. The breakthrough came on day 42, though I didn't realize it at the time. I'd been assigned to overnight inventory in the storage wing, a section of the facility I'd only passed through a handful of times. It was quieter than the main floors, separated by 2 security checkpoints in a long corridor lined with unmarked doors. Most of them were locked. The ones that weren't led to supply closets filled with replacement parts, cleaning equipment, and boxed hardware waiting to be deployed. My job was simple: scan barcodes, update quantities in the system, note any discrepancies. Mindless work. The kind that let your thoughts wander while your hands moved on autopilot. I was 3 hours into the shift when I found the room. It wasn't on my checklist. The door was tucked at the end of a side hallway I'd almost walked past. Unlike the others, this one had no keycard scanner. Just an old-fashioned keyhole and a handle that turned when I tested it. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to keep walking, to stay in my lane, to do exactly what Eric had warned me not to do. But I'd spent 42 days watching people move through this facility like pieces on a chessboard, and I still didn't know who was playing the game. If I wanted answers, I had to stop waiting for them to appear. I pushed the door open. Inside was a small office, barely larger than a closet. A metal desk sat against the far wall, covered in dust and forgotten paperwork. Filing cabinets lined the left side, their drawers hanging slightly open like someone had left in a hurry. The air smelled stale, like the room hadn't been used in months. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The paperwork on the desk was mostly old invoices and shipping manifests. Nothing useful. But when I opened the top drawer of the nearest filing cabinet, I found something different. Personnel files. Not the sanitized versions available in the employee directory. These were originals, full background checks, financial records, psychological evaluations. I flipped through them quickly, scanning names I didn't recognize. Most were former employees, people who'd worked at Arcline years ago and moved on. Then I found mine. The folder was thicker than the others. Inside was everything. My employment history, credit report, divorce filing, even a printed copy of my social media activity from the past 2 years. But it was the document clipped to the front that made my blood run cold. It was a memo, typed on Hartfield Capital Group letterhead, dated 3 weeks before Luna left me. Subject: Strategic Placement Candidate Jordan Pierce. I read it twice, then a third time, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The memo outlined a plan, not just to hire me, but to engineer the circumstances that would make me desperate enough to accept a job at Arcline. It referenced my financial situation, my strained relationship with my brother, even my, quote, high probability of compliance under emotional duress. But it was the final paragraph that shattered everything. Quote, coordination with affiliate ML confirmed. Separation event scheduled to coincide with Q4 operational needs. Candidate is unaware of selection process. Psychological profile suggests strong work ethic despite personal setbacks. Recommend immediate placement upon dissolution of primary relationship. ML. Martinez, Luna. Affiliate. I stared at the page until the words started to blur. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the folder. Luna hadn't just left me, she'd been paid to leave me, or at least coordinated with. Used as part of a plan to break me down, isolate me, and push me into a position where I'd have no choice but to take whatever job came my way. And that job just happened to be at a facility funded by the man she'd immediately started dating afterward. I sank into the desk chair, trying to breathe, trying to think. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. How long had they been watching me? How much of my life had been manipulated? The fights Luna and I had about money, were those real or rehearsed? The job rejections, were those legitimate or engineered? Every moment of the past 6 months suddenly felt suspect, like I'd been living in a script I'd never agreed to perform. I forced myself to keep reading. There were other documents in the folder. Surveillance logs detailing my movements over the past year. Transcripts of phone calls I'd made, including the one to my brother that went unanswered. Even copies of texts between Luna and someone identified only as VH. Victor Hartfield. The texts were clinical, transactional. Luna updating him on my mental state, him asking about my job search, her confirming I'd applied to the Arcline posting. It read like a progress report, not a relationship. One message stood out. Luna, he's breaking. Took the bait. Interview tonight. VH. Good. Keep distance for now. We'll move him through probation, then reassess. Luna. And after? VH. After. He's either useful or he's gone. Either way, you're clear. I closed the folder and sat there in the dark, staring at nothing. They'd treated me like a lab rat. Not a person, not even an employee, just a variable in an equation they were trying to solve. And Luna had helped them do it. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my anger to burn through the shock. Long enough for the hurt to calcify into something harder. Finally, I stood up, tucked the memo into my jacket, and put the folder back exactly where I found it. I closed the drawer, turned off the light, and stepped back into the hallway. The facility felt different now. The cameras weren't just watching for security. They were watching me. Every task I'd been given, every reassignment, every casual question from a supervisor, it was all part of the test. They wanted to see what I'd do, how far I'd go, whether I'd stay compliant or start pushing back. I walked back to the main floor, scanned out of the storage wing, and returned to my station in Section A. I finished my shift like nothing had happened, logged my hours, clocked out, took the bus home. But everything had changed. Because now I knew the truth. And I wasn't going to be their lab rat anymore. The next night, I went back to the sublevels, not for installation work, for reconnaissance. I waited until the facility hit its quietest point, around 4 a.m., when most of the night shift was on break. Then I scanned into Bay 6, using the yellow clearance badge I'd been issued during my last assignment. The system didn't flag it. As far as Arcline's computers knew, I was still authorized. The bay was empty. Just me and the rows of modular units humming in the darkness. I walked slowly between them, studying each one. The units I'd installed processing nodes in were now fully operational, their status lights glowing steady green. I stopped at Unit 14 and opened the exterior panel. Inside, the embedded screen was active. I tapped it gently, and the display came to life. Lines of code scrolled past, too fast to read in full. But I caught fragments. Predictive algorithms, market triggers, automated trading sequences designed to execute the moment certain conditions were met. This wasn't just financial software. It was a weapon. A way to move billions of dollars before regulators, before other traders, before anyone could react. And if Hartfield controlled it, he could manipulate entire sectors of the economy with a single command. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos. The screen, the code, the serial numbers on each component. I didn't know if it would be enough, but it was more than I'd had before. I was halfway through photographing Unit 16 when I heard footsteps. I froze. The steps were measured, deliberate, coming from the far end of the bay. I quickly closed the panel, pocketed my phone, and stepped back into the shadows between two units. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was Dr. Cora Ashford, the woman I'd seen by the executive elevator. She walked directly to one of the central units, scanned her badge, and opened a panel I hadn't noticed before. She stood there for a moment, reading something on a handheld device, then spoke into a headset I hadn't seen she was wearing. "Silver Lake is ahead of schedule," she said. "We're projecting full deployment by end of quarter. Hartfield wants a stress test on the Hong Kong exchange first. Low volume, controlled environment." There was a pause. She was listening to someone on the other end. "No, the asset is still in probation. He doesn't know enough to be a problem yet." Another pause. "If he becomes one, we'll handle it the same way we handled the others." My chest tightened. She closed the panel, turned, and walked back the way she came. I waited until her footsteps faded completely before I moved. I needed to get out, now. I made it back to the stairwell and climbed as quickly as I could without running. My badge scanned me out of the sublevel without issue. I walked through the main corridor, past the break room, past the monitoring station where Eric was staring at his screens, and straight to the exit. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. I stood there in the parking lot, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. They knew I was digging. Maybe not specifics, but they knew, and they'd already decided what to do if I became a problem. The same way they'd handled the others. I thought about the personnel files I'd seen, all those former employees who'd left without explanation. I'd assumed they'd just moved on, found better jobs, but now I wasn't sure. Now I wondered if they'd left at all. I got on the bus and rode home in silence, staring out the window at the dark streets rolling past. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, weighted down by the photos I'd taken. Evidence. Proof. But proof of what? Exactly. Corporate espionage? Market manipulation? And who would I even show it to? The SEC? They'd laugh me out of the building. The media? They'd need corroboration I didn't have. The police? I didn't even know what crime had been committed. I was alone, trapped in a system designed to keep me compliant. And the people running it had already made it clear what happened to problems. But I wasn't ready to disappear. Not yet. When I got home, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I uploaded the photos to an encrypted cloud drive, then created backups on 2 separate USB drives. I hid one in the lining of my jacket. The other I mailed to myself at a P.O. box I'd opened the week before. If something happened to me, at least the evidence would survive. Then I opened a blank document and started writing. Everything I knew, everything I'd seen. Names, dates, locations, the memo, the texts, the sublevels, Silver Lake. I wrote until the sun came up and my hands cramped. When I finally stopped, I had 14 pages. It wasn't enough to take them down, but it was enough to make them pay attention. And that, I was starting to realize, might be all I needed. The call came 3 days later. I was halfway through a shift, running diagnostics on a cooling system in Section B, when my supervisor found me. "Pierce," he said, his tone flat. "You're needed in admin, now." I looked up from the terminal. "What for?" "Didn't say, just told me to pull you off the floor." My stomach dropped. I nodded. Logged out of the system and followed him through the facility. We didn't speak. The hallways felt longer than usual, the fluorescent lights harsher. Every camera we passed felt like it was tracking me. Admin was on the 3rd floor, a section of the building I'd never been to. The walls here were painted instead of bare concrete. There were actual offices with windows, though the blinds were all closed. My supervisor led me to a conference room at the end of the hall and opened the door. "Inside," he said, then walked away. I stepped in. The room was cold, sterile. A long table dominated the center, surrounded by 8 chairs. 3 of them were occupied. Dr. Cora Ashford sat at the head of the table, tablet in front of her, expression unreadable. To her right was a man I didn't recognize, mid-50s, wearing a dark suit and a Hartfield Capital Group pin on his lapel. To her left was someone from building security, the kind of guy who looked like he'd done military time and hadn't quite left it behind. "Sit down, Mr. Pierce," Dr. Ashford said. I sat. She tapped her tablet once, and a screen on the wall behind her flickered to life. Security footage. Black and white, grainy, but clear enough. It showed me walking through the storage wing, opening the door to that office, staying inside for 11 minutes, then leaving. My throat went dry. "Can you explain what you were doing in a restricted area 4 nights ago?" she asked. I kept my face neutral. I got turned around during inventory, thought it was a supply closet. For 11 minutes? I was looking for cleaning equipment. Took me a while to realize I was in the wrong place. The man in the suit leaned forward. "Mr. Pierce, we take security very seriously here. Unauthorized access to restricted areas is grounds for immediate termination." He slid a folder across the table. "This is a formal write-up. Sign it, and we'll consider this a warning." I opened the folder. The write-up was standard. Detailed the incident, outlined the violation, included a space for my signature. But there was something else in the folder. A second document, partially visible beneath the first. I tilted my head slightly to read it. Incident report, unauthorized data access. They weren't just accusing me of being in the wrong room. They were accusing me of stealing information. I looked up. I didn't access any data. Dr. Ashford's expression didn't change. The logs show otherwise. A terminal in that office was activated at 2:47 a.m. User credentials were entered. Files were opened. That wasn't me. Then who was it? I didn't answer, because I didn't have one. I hadn't touched the computer in that office. Hadn't even turned it on. But if the log said otherwise, arguing wouldn't help. They'd already decided what happened. This meeting wasn't about finding the truth. It was about making me compliant. Or making me leave. "Sign the write-up," the man in the suit said again. "Or we escalate this to a formal investigation. And trust me, you don't want that." I stared at the paper. If I signed it, I'd be admitting guilt, accepting their version of events, giving them leverage to control me. But if I didn't, they'd find another way to push me out. Or worse. I thought about the memo in my jacket, the photos on my phone, the backups I'd hidden. If I walked out of here now, all of that would be useless. I'd be gone, and Silver Lake would continue without anyone knowing what it really was. But if I stayed, I'd be walking a tightrope with no net. I picked up the pen. "I'll sign," I said. But I wanted on record that I didn't access any files. I was in the wrong place, nothing more. Dr. Ashford nodded. Noted. I signed the paper and slid it back across the table. The man in the suit stood. "You're being reassigned. Effective immediately, you'll be working day shifts in the warehouse. No facility access. No server maintenance. Just inventory and loading." I looked at him. "The warehouse?" "Consider it a probationary period. Prove you can follow protocol, and maybe we'll reconsider." I nodded slowly. It was a demotion. A punishment. A message. "Stay in line or disappear." The security guard stood and opened the door. "Someone will escort you to collect your things." I walked out of the conference room, heart pounding, mind racing. They hadn't fired me. That meant they still needed something from me. Or they were waiting to see what I'd do next. Either way, I was running out of time. The warehouse was exactly what it sounded like. A massive, windowless building on the edge of the Arcline campus, filled with pallets of equipment and rows of industrial shelving. My new job was simple. Receive shipments, log inventory, load trucks. No computers, no sublevels, no access to anything that mattered. It was exile. I spent the first 2 days in a haze, moving boxes and scanning barcodes while my mind churned. I couldn't get to the servers anymore, couldn't gather more evidence. Couldn't do anything except watch the clock and wonder how long I had before they decided I wasn't worth keeping around. On the 3rd day, I saw him. Victor Hartfield. He arrived in a black SUV just after noon, flanked by 2 assistants and a security detail. I was loading a pallet near the loading dock when he walked past, talking on his phone, not even glancing in my direction. But I saw him. Saw the tailored suit, the confident stride, The way everyone around him moved like he was the center of gravity. And I saw Luna. She was with him, walking half a step behind, carrying a leather portfolio, dressed like she belonged in his world. She laughed at something he said, her hand briefly touching his arm. She looked happy. I stood there frozen, watching them disappear into the main building, my hands clenched around the pallet jack handle so hard my knuckles turned white. She'd done this. She'd helped them break me, isolate me, turn me into a piece on their board. And now she was here, playing the role of the perfect partner, while I loaded boxes in a warehouse. I wanted to scream, to run after her, to demand answers. But I didn't. Because anger without strategy is just noise. And I was done making noise. That night, I didn't go home. I sat in my car in the parking lot, engine off, staring at the Arcline facility through the chain-link fence. The lights inside glowed softly, steady and indifferent. I thought about everything I'd learned, the personnel files, the texts, Silver Lake, the stress test in Hong Kong, the way Dr. Ashford had talked about me like I was disposable. They'd made a mistake. They'd underestimated me. They thought breaking me would make me weak. But it had done the opposite. It had made me focused. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted folder with the photos I'd taken in Bay 6. I scrolled through them slowly, studying each image, the code, the algorithms, the serial numbers. Then I opened my email and started typing. The message was short, professional, vague enough to avoid detection, but clear enough to get attention. I have information regarding Project Silver Lake and its potential market impact. Interested parties should respond within 48 hours. I sent it to 3 addresses: a financial journalist I'd found through a quick search, a former SEC investigator who now ran a corporate fraud consultancy, and a congressional staffer whose name I'd pulled from a public hearing on market manipulation. I didn't know if any of them would respond, didn't know if they'd take me seriously, but it was a start. I hit send and sat back, exhaling slowly. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was the one making a move. Not them. Me. And whatever happened next, I'd be ready. The first response came 16 hours later. I was in the warehouse, restocking shelves with replacement server components, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced around to make sure no supervisors were nearby, then checked the screen. It was from the financial journalist. Subject line, need to talk, secure line. My heart rate picked up. I waited until my lunch break, then walked to the far corner of the parking lot where the security cameras had blind spots. I called the number he'd included in the email. He picked up on the second ring. "This is Nathan Cross," he said. His voice was sharp, efficient. "You're the one who sent the Silver Lake email." "Yeah." "What's your name?" I hesitated. "Does it matter?" "If you want me to take this seriously, yes." "Jordan Pierce." There was a pause. I heard typing in the background. "You work at Arcline Systems." "Used to. Now I'm in the warehouse." "Demotion or punishment?" "Both." More typing. "All right, Jordan Pierce. You said you have information about Project Silver Lake. I'm listening." I spent the next 20 minutes walking him through everything. The sub-levels, the modular units, the predictive algorithms, the stress test planned for Hong Kong. I didn't mention the personnel files yet, didn't mention Luna. I wanted to see if he'd bite on the technical stuff first. When I finished, there was a long silence. "You have proof?" he finally asked. "Photos, code samples, serial numbers, internal memos." "Send them to me, encrypted. Use the link I'm about to text you." "And then what?" "Then I verify what you're telling me. If it checks out, I'll need more. Witnesses, documentation, a paper trail." "But if this is what you say it is, Jordan, this isn't just a story. This is the kind of thing that ends careers and starts investigations." I exhaled slowly. "How long do I have?" "To get me everything? 48 hours. After that, if Hartfield catches wind that someone's digging, he'll bury it. And you." "Understood." "One more thing," Nathan said. "Be careful who you trust. If they're willing to manipulate markets, they're willing to manipulate you." The call ended. I stood there in the parking lot, staring at my phone. This was real now. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And if Nathan was right, I had 2 days to gather enough evidence to make this stick. 2 days before Hartfield buried me. I went back inside, finished my shift on autopilot, then clocked out and headed home. But instead of going to my apartment, I drove to a coffee shop 3 miles away. Somewhere public. Somewhere with cameras and witnesses. I ordered a black coffee, sat in the corner with my laptop, and started organizing everything I had. Photos, documents, notes. I created a timeline. Cross-referenced names and dates. Built a narrative that connected Hartfield Capital Group to Arcline Systems to Project Silver Lake. It took me 4 hours. By the time I finished, I had a 40-page document. Comprehensive, detailed, damning. I uploaded it to the encrypted link Nathan had sent, then created 2 more backups. One went to a second cloud account under a fake name. The other went onto a USB drive I tucked into the inner pocket of my jacket. Then I closed my laptop and sat back, staring at the half-empty coffee cup in front of me. I'd just declared war on one of the most powerful men in the country. And I had no idea if I'd survive it. The next day, I went back to Arcline like nothing had changed. Scanned my badge, walked into the warehouse, started my shift. But everything felt different. The weight of what I'd set in motion pressed down on me with every step. I kept expecting security to pull me aside. For Dr. Ashford to appear with another accusation. For Victor Hartfield himself to walk in and tell me I was done. But nothing happened. The morning passed slowly. I loaded pallets, updated inventory logs, avoided eye contact with anyone who looked like they might ask questions. Then, just before lunch, Eric found me. He walked into the warehouse like he had every right to be there, hands in his pockets, expression casual, but his eyes were sharp. "Need to borrow you for a minute," he said loud enough for the nearby supervisor to hear. "Got a server issue in the main building. Need someone who knows the layout." The supervisor waved us off without looking up. Eric led me out of the warehouse and across the campus toward the main facility. We didn't speak until we were inside, walking through an empty corridor on the second floor. "You've been busy," he said quietly. I glanced at him. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Jordan. I've been watching you since day one. I know you found the personnel files. I know you've been in the sub-levels. And I know you sent something to a journalist yesterday." I stopped walking. "How do you know that?" He turned to face me. "Because I'm the one who's been covering for you." I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. "You've been what?" "The security footage from the storage wing, I edited it. Made it look like you were only in that office for 3 minutes instead of 11. The terminal logs showing unauthorized access? I falsified those to make it look less suspicious." He crossed his arms. "You think you've been flying under the radar this whole time? You haven't. You've just had someone watching your back." "Why?" Eric exhaled slowly. "Because I've been where you are. 3 years ago, I was a senior systems analyst here. I found out what Silver Lake really was, tried to blow the whistle. They buried me, demoted me to night shift monitoring, destroyed my reputation, made sure I'd never work in tech again." He paused. "I've been waiting for someone like you, someone angry enough to fight back, someone who actually has a chance." "A chance at what?" "At taking them down." I looked at him for a long moment. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I'm just telling you, you're not alone. And if you're going to do this, you need to do it right." He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket and held it out. "This has everything I've been collecting for the past 3 years. Financial records, communications between Hartfield and Ashford. Proof that Silver Lake was built on stolen IP from a startup Hartfield acquired and gutted. It's all there." I took the drive. "Why didn't you use this yourself?" "Because I'm a nobody, a disgraced employee with an axe to grind. But you? You're new, you're clean. And if you play this right, you've got credibility I never had." He stepped back. "Give that to your journalist. Let him do what I couldn't." "And what happens to you?" "I disappear, same as I've been doing." He smiled faintly. "But at least I'll know I helped finish what I started." Before I could respond, his radio crackled. A voice came through, calling him back to the monitoring station. "I have to go," he said. "Good luck, Jordan. You're going to need it." He walked away, leaving me standing there in the empty corridor, holding the flash drive like it was a live grenade. I went back to the warehouse, finished my shift, and left as soon as I could. I didn't go home. I went back to the coffee shop, ordered another coffee, and plugged the drive into my laptop. Eric hadn't been exaggerating. The files were comprehensive. Emails between Victor Hartfield and Dr. Ashford discussing the acquisition of a company called Quantum Insights, a small AI firm that had developed early predictive trading algorithms. Documents showing how Hartfield had systematically dismantled the company, fired the founders, and absorbed their technology into Arcline under a new name, Silver Lake. There were financial records showing payments to shell companies, NDAs signed under duress, even a recorded phone call where Hartfield explicitly discussed using the technology to front-run the market before anyone knows we're there. It was everything Nathan needed. I uploaded the files to the encrypted link, then sent Nathan a message. "Check your inbox. This changes everything." His response came 10 minutes later. "Holy hell, give me 24 hours. I'm bringing this to my editor. If this is real, we're running it." I closed my laptop and sat back, staring at the ceiling. 24 hours. One day until the story broke. One day until Victor Hartfield's empire started crumbling. One day until Luna realized the man she'd left me for was going down in flames. And I'd be the one holding the match. The article went live at 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning. I was sitting in my car in the Arcline parking lot when my phone buzzed with a notification. Nathan had sent me a link with a single message. "It's done. Brace yourself." The headline read, "Hartfield Capital's Secret AI, How One Firm Built a Market Manipulation Machine in Plain Sight." I clicked through and started reading. Nathan had done his job well. Every detail I'd provided was there, corroborated with Eric's files and additional reporting Nathan had done independently. He'd found former Quantum Insights employees willing to go on record. He'd obtained internal Hartfield communications through a source I didn't know about. He'd even gotten a comment from a former SEC official, calling the technology potentially the most dangerous financial tool ever created outside of regulatory oversight. The article named names: Victor Hartfield, Dr. Cora Ashford, Arcline Systems, Project Silver Lake. It detailed the Hong Kong stress test that was scheduled for the following week. It explained how the technology could destabilize markets, manipulate trading patterns, and generate billions in profit before anyone could react. And buried in the 15th paragraph it mentioned me, not by name but by description, a whistleblower who worked inside the facility and risked everything to expose what he'd found. I sat back, exhaling slowly. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from relief. It was out there now, public, permanent. No matter what Hartfield did to me, the truth was already spreading. By 7 a.m., the story had been picked up by 3 major financial news networks. By 8 a.m., it was trending on social media. By 9 a.m., trading on Hartfield Capital Group's publicly listed holdings had been temporarily halted pending an investigation. I watched it all unfold from my phone, barely believing it was real. Then I saw the email. Sent to my personal address at 8:47 a.m. subject line. Mandatory all-staff meeting, 10 a.m. I knew what this was. Damage control. Hartfield trying to get ahead of the narrative. And if I didn't show up, it would look like I was hiding. So I went. The meeting was held in the main conference center on the Arcline campus, a building I'd never been inside before. It was massive, easily large enough to hold 200 people. Every seat was filled. Employees from every department, day shift and night shift, crowded into rows of chairs facing a raised platform at the front. I slipped in through a side entrance and found a spot near the back, trying to stay invisible, but I could feel eyes on me, people whispering, pointing. Word had spread fast. Everyone knew someone had talked to the press, and based on the looks I was getting, most of them had figured out it was me. At exactly 10 a.m., the lights dimmed and 3 figures walked onto the stage. Dr. Cora Ashford, a lawyer I didn't recognize, and Victor Hartfield. He looked exactly like he had in every photo I'd seen, polished, controlled, radiating the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He wore a navy suit with no tie, his shirt collar open just enough to seem approachable. His expression was calm, almost sympathetic. He stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth and measured. "I know many of you have seen the news this morning. I want to address it directly because transparency is something I've always valued." I almost laughed. Transparency. From the man who'd orchestrated my entire collapse. The article published today contains serious allegations, quote, he continued. Allegations that are not only false, but recklessly irresponsible. Hartfield Capital Group has always operated within the bounds of the law. ArcLink Systems is a legitimate data processing facility, and Project Silver Lake is a research initiative focused on improving market efficiency, nothing more. He paused, letting that sink in. Unfortunately, there are individuals who misunderstand complex technology and jump to conclusions. Individuals who, for personal reasons, choose to distort facts and spread misinformation. His eyes scanned the crowd. I knew he was looking for me. This company was built on trust, he said. Trust between colleagues, trust between leadership and staff, and when that trust is broken, it affects all of us. Dr. Ashford stepped forward then, taking the microphone. We are cooperating fully with regulators, she said. We have nothing to hide. In the meantime, operations will continue as normal. Anyone found spreading false information or engaging with media without authorization will be subject to immediate termination. The message was clear. Stay quiet, or lose your job. Hartfield took the microphone back. I want to thank those of you who have remained loyal during this difficult time. Your work matters. This company matters. And I promise you we will come through this stronger than ever. Applause rippled through the room. Not everyone clapped, but enough did. Enough to make it feel like Hartfield was winning. He smiled, gave a small wave, and started to walk off the stage. And that's when I stood up. Mr. Hartfield, I called out, my voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. The room went silent, every head turned toward me. Hartfield stopped mid-step and looked back, his expression unreadable. Yes, he said. I stepped into the aisle, my heart pounding. You said the allegations in the article are false. But I was there. I installed the hardware in Bay 6. I saw the predictive algorithms. I read the communications between you and Dr. Ashford about front-running the Hong Kong exchange. The lawyer on stage leaned toward Hartfield, whispering something urgent. Hartfield held up a hand, silencing him. I'm sorry, Hartfield said, his tone patronizing. Who are you? Jordan Pierce. I worked here for 2 months. And before that, I was married to Luna Martinez, your current partner. A collective gasp rippled through the room. People shifted in their seats, pulling out phones, recording. Hartfield's smile didn't falter. Mr. Pierce, I understand you're upset. Divorce is difficult, but projecting your personal frustrations onto a company you barely understand is not the answer. I understand enough, I said, my voice steady now. I know you paid my wife to leave me. I have the texts between you two. I have the memo outlining how you engineered my financial collapse so I'd be desperate enough to take a job here. You didn't hire me because I was qualified. You hired me because I was broken. The room erupted, voices overlapping, people shouting questions. Security guards started moving toward me from both sides of the aisle. Hartfield raised his hand and the room quieted. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Pierce. Do you have proof? I pulled out my phone and held it up. I do. And so does the SEC, and the journalist who wrote that article, and the congressional committee that's opening an investigation tomorrow. Hartfield's smile finally cracked, just for a second, just long enough for me to see the anger underneath. Escort Mr. Pierce out, he said quietly. 2 security guards grabbed my arms, but I didn't resist. I'd said what I needed to say. And more importantly, I'd said it in front of 200 witnesses with their phones out. As they dragged me toward the exit, I looked back at Hartfield one last time. He was standing on that stage, surrounded by lawyers and executives, but for the first time since I'd seen him, he looked small. They shoved me out the door and into the parking lot. One of the guards handed me a termination letter, pre-printed and ready to go. You're done here, he said. I took the letter, folded it, and put it in my pocket. Yeah, I said, I am. I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a moment, staring at the ArcLink facility through the windshield. My phone was already blowing up. Messages from Nathan. Emails from lawyers offering representation. Even a voicemail from the congressional staffer I'd contacted asking me to testify. It was over. My time at ArcLink, my silence, my compliance, all of it. But something else was just beginning. I started the car and drove away, watching the facility shrink in the rearview mirror until it disappeared completely. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.